Hello, welcome to the football show. I'm joined by Tipperary footballer Michael Quinlivan. We'll have Mickey Quinn of Longford on shortly. But Michael, how are you doing? Obviously, big weekend of football just after passing by there. Mayo won the Connacht title, beating Galway 2-14 to 2-8. Great second half there for Mayo. Kerry saw off Cork 422 to 1-9. It was a bit of an annihilation for a finish. Just what were your thoughts on the two games and what you saw?
Yeah, big weekend of football. First of all, thanks for having me on.
Absolutely.
Obviously means that you're well gone out of championship, but it's still good to be back chatting to you. Big weekend of football. I think obviously Galway and Mayo completely game of two halves. You could really see that Mayo stepped it up big time in the second half on number one in physicality, but also stopped Galway coming out through their backline. It was, really slowed down their forwards in the second half and then hurt them going the other way with their penetrating running from the half backline, from the likes of Keegan, Durkin. Again, just, they're so good to watch, and even though they're missing Killian O'Connor up there, and I think, maybe that might come up against them a little later in the year when they're looking just for a scorer who's going to guarantee a 1-6 or 1-7 in a match between frees and a couple of points from play. They still have so many different ways that they can hurt you, and they're definitely an impressive beast against whoever's going to come out of the Leinster final next weekend.
Yeah.
On the Munster side, funnily enough, I don't think people thought it was much of a surprise because of how highly thought of Kerry are this year and how they've been playing, number one throughout the league. And then in the Munster Championship as well, they've obviously put us to the sword in the semi-final. They're so ruthless at the minute, and similar to what you would have said about Dublin a few years back. You saw that Clifford was kept quiet for a long time, but they just have so many scorers coming from so many different parts of the field that, if you really do try to focus on one or two of their players, they have everyone else that's going to hurt you. They have scores coming from their backline, and every single one of their shots is nearly on the 13-yard line, or close. So it's really, really impressive what they're doing, and they're building really nicely into a semi-final.
Yeah, I thought we had Mickey Quinn joining us there. Oh, he's reappeared again. How are you doing, Mickey?
Good, lads.
Hey, Mick. How are things?
Good now, yourselves?
You're just getting adjusted there, Mickey, but we're talking about obviously Kerry's huge win yesterday and what Mayo did in the second half against Galway. Who of the two teams are you more impressed by based on those two games?
It's hard to know. I thought Mayo probably more so. Their fitness levels, I didn't think. I think they could be the one to match up nicely against Kerry or against Dublin.
We might have lost him for a second.
I think
just while we're waiting for him to come back, Michael, you've played against Kerry only a couple of weeks ago, and you played against Mayo last season in the All-Ireland semi-final, and you talked about the running power already, and I was watching Gavin White steaming forward yesterday. Obviously, you've come up against him again. What are they like? If you could compare and contrast the weaknesses of the two teams, and if you were trying to say one team is stronger than the other just now, who would you be kind of favouring?
I think it's very hard to look past Kerry at the minute. I just think that they just seem so in tune with what they're trying to do at the minute. You saw maybe the first 15 minutes against Cork. Cork got a lot of joy on their own kickouts, and it actually caused Kerry problems going the other way because there was so much space in front of Brian Hurley that they were able to put the ball into because they were winning primary possession out at the middle of the field. Now, for a lot of other teams in that situation, if you were going in 4 points down at a water break, and it was pretty clear that Cork maybe had the upper hand, that a lot of teams might change and switch things up and go away from the press that they've been working obviously so hard on throughout the league and already in the championship. But they just stayed true to it, started to turn over a little bit more ball, and then suddenly they get a goal and bang, they've put Cork away within 10 minutes. And that's just the impressive side of it. That ruthless edge, Mayo had it for a long, long time. When they'd get a goal, they'd suddenly have 3 or 4 points on the board shortly afterwards. And a 2-point game, it turned into a 5-point swing at half time. And Kerry are starting to do that to teams. the whole way up, and that's why I'd probably put them a little bit closer.
Yeah, Mickey, the line seemed to drop just for a second. So that was, Mike was just talking about who of Mayo and Kerry do you think are stronger just now? Obviously, they're both provincial winners going into the All-Ireland semis. Looks like we're going to have Mayo probably against Dublin most likely, and then Kerry against either Tyrone or Monaghan. So who of those two teams that we saw yesterday do you think is better placed to push on here?
Yeah, look, at both teams impressed really well. Like, as what Mick said there about Kerry, like, being ruthless. I think Cork had a goal chance and went straight down the other end of the field, and I think Gainey's goal came from that, like a 6-point turnaround. I think that's exactly what...
Has he dropped again? Can you hear him, Michael?
I can, yeah.
Right, I can't hear him.
You're talking really well, though. You're talking well, Mick. Talking sense is what I say.
Reiterating your point. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, yeah, Mick.
But yeah, Jesus, Gainey's goal chance, 6-point swing there when Cork missed their goal chance. And I don't know that stretched the lead from, I think we could have been at 5 points at that stage. And instead of bringing it back to 2 points, it steps out to an 8-point game. And things like that, I think that's where the big teams kill you. And I think probably, like, you playing against Kerry, see that too, and against Dublin, all of a sudden you're in a game and then you're just blown out of the water. Same thing with Mayo against Galway. All of a sudden, second half, you turn the TV off or to a different channel for 2 minutes and come back, and it's like,
I just keep losing Mickey there.
It's gone again, is it?
No, you're perfect for me anyway, Mick.
Mickey, could I just get you to drop off and jump on again, just so?
Yeah.
It's an unusual one. Yeah. Okay.
I think from what he's saying, I think what he's saying there is right, though. Like, the big teams don't need a prolonged 25-minute spell to put teams away. Dublin have been doing it for years. Kerry have really started to show that side of their game, and Mayo have obviously been doing the same to a lot of teams over the last number of years. I was really impressed with on the Mayo during the Mayo game with just how slow that they made the Galway backs come out of the field. I know we played them in the All-Ireland semi-final last year, and they did the same to us, just turnovers from the middle of the field. And the problem is, after you get turned over a couple of times around the middle or in your half back line, you're very scared to go into the tackle with them. It slows down your whole game, clogs up the middle, because you're kind of a little bit tentative, even trying to just put the shoulder down and go past someone, because you're so scared of getting turned over, and suddenly they're down far side of the field and it's another score. And you could see it starting to happen a small bit, I thought, with Galway in the second half, that as Mayo continued to turn them over, Padraig O'Hora had a couple of unbelievable turnovers down in the corner, and then they're streaming forward in numbers, and they're causing you so much problems with the hard running that they do, that it was really what turned the game for them, and it was just chalk and cheese between the first half and second half. It's actually crazy to think that you were watching the same game half an hour apart.
The switch tacked a little bit, kind of like exactly jotting down points there. What you said, make there the way they pressed up so high, like Ryan O'Donoghue, their forwards, how hard they tackle and chase. Like, you think, okay, we'll get the short kick out and we'll work it out. By the time Galway got to the midfield mark, I think they were shattered, because there was that much pressure on them. And then if you go long, they've got big players around the middle that you're going to be beaten that way. And you kind of get pinned in from your own kickouts. And that seemed to be what happened, Galway. Whereas in the first half, Galway seemed to be able to transition from defence to attack easily, whether Mayo were dropping off a bit deeper and runners were coming from deep, but they just seemed to turn the switch. Like, I heard Matthew Rowan saying at half-time, or after the game, that half-time they said they just needed to work hard and tackle more, which is, it seems very simple.
I've lost him again just there for a second. Do you think, Michael, Quinlivan, that is, do you think that if Kevin Walsh was the one who was managing the team yesterday and they didn't score from play in the second half, that they get absolutely slaughtered? I mean, both he and Pádraig Joyce are legends of the counties, but, Kevin was considered as defensive coach. He did get hammered for their tactics plenty of times. Do you think like Joyce is going to get away with it to some degree because he's this legendary attacker for them?
I think Pádraig Joyce's status in Galway is cemented regardless of what happens with him being a manager. He was an incredible player for the county, and you can see he just wants to put Galway, make Galway football, get them back up to that level again where they're winning All Irelands. I'm not 100% sure it was down to any sort of tactical switch on the Galway side. It was just pure Mayo aggression, determination, and you know, really everything about it was what has made Mayo football so good over the last number of years, where they're just so incredibly hard to play against, each one of their players, all the way up to their corner forward line, like Mickey has mentioned there, like Ryan O'Donoghue tackling as hard as possible, and that feeds through their team, and they seem to get energy from it. And it was ultimately that which swung the game. I think Mickey mentioned it as well earlier, just about the fitness levels of the Mayo team. Like, as the day was getting hotter and hotter in Croke Park, it seemed they were getting stronger, which is a testament probably to the work that they've put in. And it's certainly in the last 15 or 20 minutes, they seem to be going to the fore. They were still streaming forward in numbers and still causing Galway so many problems by doing that.
And like that third quarter there, for Kerry, they won 3-3 to 0. And like after the goal, when Brian Hurley scored the goal and it made it 1-5 to 3 points, having watched Kerry be quite sloppy in the first 15 minutes, they kind of missed a few goal chances, turned over a few times, sloppy passes, all that kind of stuff. It seemed, right, maybe 2 years in a row, maybe Cork have a chance to catch them here. But they won the rest of the game 4-19 to 4 points, Michael. Did you, Quinlivan, that is. Like, did you expect that from Cork? Did you expect them to fall over like that? And how difficult is it mid-game to be like, right, we're under the cosh here, we need to stop this? You know, what Limerick did to the Tip hurlers last week, what Galway did to Waterford hurlers over the weekend.
Yeah, it's a funny one. It can be very hard when you're in the heat of that, when it's really, you know, when the pressure starts to come on. To normally you'll always see someone try to go down with an injury or even just stem the flow in any sort of way possible. Funnily enough, the water break actually has made a difference, because it gives teams that little 2-minute break to try and change things. And that would be probably the most disappointing thing for Cork, I would say, is the fact that they, you know, things were going so well for them at the first break. They obviously didn't recalibrate too much at half time, and then probably left it go on a little bit further after the water break in the second half. But you'd have to give Kerry credit too. Like, they were out for blood. Each one of the players who was coming on is looking to add to the game. And the other thing that really stood out to me is how much enjoyment they seem to be getting out of playing together. You see it after any of the goals, after any of the scores. There's 2 and 3 men over celebrating with whoever's after getting the score. And a lot of the time in that situation, it's the person who's after hand passing them the ball who's after giving them the easiest tap in, and the two of them are gone off together. And you can I really got a sense for that. You could see David Moran talking about it in the aftermath, saying that it's just kind of dawned on him about how special maybe that this group of young lads coming through for Kerry is, and it's probably why everyone else in the country is thinking that they might be the ones who are able to dethrone the Dubs later in the summer.
And Mickey Quinn, do you think that Cork were looking at a weakness of Kerry in the backline by going long and high? Luke Connolly had a couple of high kicks into the area that went directly wide, and I think there was a couple of other kicks early into the area. That weakness, that perceived weakness that was there. I remember Con O'Callaghan caught a ball over Paul Murphy in the Thurles League game earlier in the year. Like, do you think that weakness is there for Kerry that might catch up with them?
Yeah, probably when you see what Brian Hurley done against Jason Foley, there's a couple of scores there where his goal chance where he took him on, and there's a couple of points there where the ball came in. But I think, as Mick touched on it, the amount of space that was there for the ball to be played in, you know, I think Kerry were probably a little naive in that, and that's something that they wouldn't like to see happening again, that their half-back line were probably gone. And Luke Connolly probably loves to spray those passes a lot of the time to go long. And when you have forwards like Brian Hurley and Michael Hurley, all you want to do is get them in one-on-one. And that's something that Kerry probably, against Cork, they allowed that, but I don't think against the likes of Dublin or Tyrone or Monaghan that you could allow a ball to come in and be in a position where it's a one-on-one there with Conor McManus or who else in there, some of the Tyrone full forward line, that it's not really ideally how you want to be setting up. But like what Paudie Clifford gives to Kerry, I think is something that probably David gets all the praise, and probably Paudie's getting a little bit more from this weekend. But geez, he had 3 points, and that assist for Sean O'Shea's goal is kind of what Mick's been talking about there. That, you know, he was quite happy to give that ball across the goal for a Pam goal rather than I'll get my 4 point here and tip it over. And I think that's where the top teams are at. That you get as much out of those last hand pass across the face of goals than just a fisted point. He was super, and I think Kerry had 13 different scores across the board, which it just shows that as much as Clifford has been the focal point and putting in massive scores, that their half-back line, midfield, they're scores that are capable of coming from anywhere. And I think probably the weather is always a levelling playing field, and looking back at last year's championship, you know, the weather conditions, those probably bring the so-called weaker teams back into it. But the likes of Kerry on a day like that, fitness will tell a tale and probably less mistakes. So I think Cork will probably be kicking themselves too, the way they were in the hunt and such a good start, and how quickly it can change just before half time, and then after that just blew them out of the water.
Yeah, a question for you, Michael, having the way you set up. Sorry, you probably wanted to jump in there, but
no, I was just going to say that Kerry must be the only team in the country who have a cornerback who averages 2 points a game. Like, yeah, but something Mickey touched on there. I think the next day, looking a little bit further down the line for them, they'll either line up against Tyrone or Monaghan, and both keepers on both sides of that have a kick out that will go over the Kerry press. Like, Beggan can reach the opposition 45, especially on a warm day. And I wonder, will it mean that they'll have to be a little bit more conservative on that side of the ball, that they won't be able to, because at the minute they're nearly pushing 11, 12 men into the opposition. If not the opposition 65, then certainly past their own 65, and really going after the ball. You've seen it the whole way through the league, and what they're doing, if you try to go short, is they're nearly pushing in on top of you in that situation, trying to turn you over, like what Mayo and Dublin have been doing to teams at that level. And it's just an interesting one. It'll be a nice subplot going into the next day to see whether they're as brave against the keepers who can go out over the top of that press.
Yeah, they've done against you guys.
Yeah, they've done it throughout the league. Like, they have it so in tune that, like, they obviously have their set positions for they're pushing 8 players into their forward line with 3 behind, which is a lot of people. That's a lot of men, and they're never all in the same position. You can see how in tune they are, that they're already thinking, right, if I'm a forward, and you notice it with their forward line as well, because they have so many players who can play inside and outside. Sean O'Shea does it, Gainey does it, Paudie Clifford does it. David Clifford's nearly the only one who actually stays maybe on the inside forward line. That they end up in different positions consistently depending on how they've attacked. But they obviously have worked on it so hard that when the ball goes dead, they all get back to one of the 8 positions in their back line, with David Moran sitting right in the middle of the field. He's the one who goes and attacks the ball, whether it goes either side. And then, you know, one of the other midfielders on one side and a wing back on the other, with just their full back line left inside. And that's why you saw so much space inside for Hurley and the guys in the first half, because Cork were able to win the ball at midfield and transition. Kerry backline aren't set back there. It's quick. But it's something definitely I'll be looking at the next day to see, you know, because obviously the change in the Dublin keeper situation, like, I don't know, does Evan Comerford have a kick out that's going to go over the back of David Moran there? But certainly the other two do. And it'll be an interesting one.
Michael, another one just before, I know you have to go. You've work and calling and that.
Yeah.
Just one final question for you though. Again, like, when you come up against Kerry, and you know, you like, obviously every defender is going to try and keep with his man, but like Tom O'Sullivan's scores were mentioned, and one of them, he was soloing through, and a man decided to stay with David Clifford rather than turn and track him. And even the Brino Bugli goal, Sean Powter didn't engage him. Instead, he kind of stayed off with his man who didn't actually stay darting forward, which allowed O'Bugli to go through. So you're caught in two minds. Like, what do you do in that situation? You're kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't.
Yeah, do you know what? I think it's a credit to how comfortable and how composed they are on the ball, that they nearly let the situation unfold in front of them. But the other thing kind of call out there would be the fact that you notice it with the other players that none of them are running towards them for the ball. So like, they're actually getting out of the space and saying, do you know what, it's okay if Thomas Sullivan or Brian O'Bigliac has the ball, because they can carry it the full way in and they'll take their own shot. And if you want to go to them, then they can give it to me. They're not actually running back or across their path at all. They're nearly vacating the space and saying to the defence, either you make a decision here or we're going to cut you right open. And it's great to see. Like, Kerry have always had backs who contributed on the scoreline, and it's always been a huge part of their game, and it's certainly back this year. Been really impressed with Gavin White as well. He's just he breaks the line so much, and he's gone inside the cover, and then they're at you. And it's great. It's great to watch. I would say that's the big thing. Their Kerryers are certainly box office at the minute. Like, you don't want to miss a match because you're seeing what's going to happen next, and it's only going to be getting more and more intense as you get into an All-Ireland series coming in a couple of weeks' time.
Okay, well, look, brilliant to have you join us there, Michael. I know you have to get back to work, so I really appreciate that, and great insights as always.
Thanks, guys. I'll chat to you soon. All right.
Mickey, so just to take that point up with you as well, like, you've obviously planned for many Gaelic football matches. You've played against Dublin in the Championship, a number of the big teams over the years. What Michael is talking about there, when you're, in terms of being damned if you do and damned if you don't, tracking that runner, like, what do you do other than, like, deciding, look, we'll go blanket defence? It's very hard when you want to be able to try play, counter, go both ways, not just be a defensive team.
Yeah, like, I think you're stepping off number 2 or number 4 coming forward, and you say, right, there's no point in going to him. He's looking for the shooters, and that's as simple as it is. There's not too many that defenders will come up the field and rattle the net the way Kerry did, or clip over points, and you're almost thinking, okay, drop off, don't concede the score or the goal in that case with Cork and Kerry. But obviously there was enough cover from behind where they probably should have pushed out. Ian Maguire was chasing back his man, and I think his man was more so just pulling away and leaving space, and probably that decision needed to be made sooner to close the ball carrier rather than let him carry it so far. But I think, looking at both teams, Kerry and Mayo, I just think Kerry or Mayo might have better matchups across the pitch to compete against Dublin. I'd be worried seeing probably some of those things with Kerry, whether they come with a different game plan against the likes of Dublin, and that Mayo have a better matchup, and even round the middle, with Matthew Ryan and Loftus seems to be a really good partnership there that seems to be doing really well so far. Whereas David Moran, I think David Moran, if Kerry could afford it as an impact sub or not playing a full game, because I do think probably in the past that Dublin's running game has kind of put him under pressure, turning and trying to chase back. Whereas I think David Moran's best game was going forward, playing balls inside forward and coming on late. But when Dublin keep the possession for so long, the likes of that drains the energy out of oppositions, and that's something that even you look back at the Meath game where they were under pressure for long periods. When we talk about game smarts or game management, Dublin kept the ball for 4 minutes and Fenton clipped over a point. There's not too many teams that have the confidence and ability to do that when the game is in the crunch, and that comes with probably the experience they have, but also the fitness and the quality of players that they have as well. So yeah, I think it's funny. It seems like it's only shaping up to the real part of the championship now.
Do you know, as I was watching Cork in the first half and Kerry started to take over and get score after score, and Cork couldn't even get up the field to I don't even have a shot or keep it in the Kerry half of the field at all, I was saying to myself, why isn't Micheál Martin going short with any of these kickouts? Now, Michael was 100% right in terms of the press. There was times when there was like 5 men, a 5-man full forward line just kind of right in front of the goalkeeper. But a lot of these turnover scores that Kerry got, there was once or twice I looked at and said, you actually have an option here. You have a short option here. Because what they needed was, my opinion, was to hold on to the ball for a minute or two, just take a breath, kind of slow down the flurry of Kerry attacks. But is that just, it's easy for me to say when I'm watching on the TV, and when you're out in the field, it just doesn't work that way?
I think it's probably across the board. What happens is when a team gets a running, the automatic thing is that, right, we'll slow it down. And when you look at something like that, when you're under pressure, sometimes the best thing to do is maybe get the ball out quickly, and you might be able to get a bit of breathing ground. Because when you slow the ball down, the opposition is going to press up, which Kerry are brilliant, obviously, at doing. And it kind of just fed into them. When they went long with the kickouts, they were being bet. When they went short, they were putting on pressure. But in that position, if you've done enough work on it and you're confident enough to get that ball out short and maybe just hold on to it and get it in the hands. But again, that comes down to confidence in the keeper, and then confidence in the players to come looking for the ball. When a team gets running a run on you like that, everyone's kind of like, okay, looking over the shoulder for someone else to take up the slack or get a couple of short kickouts. But you got to be working really hard and have confidence in that player that the keeper is going short with, and it's a team effort really. And I think the keeper obviously trying to do the right thing and just get it away from the danger zone. But when you look at the likes of Dublin, when they come under pressure, and even some of the other top teams, that it's getting that kick out away quickly and getting it into the hands of your teammates, whether it be a defender or midfielder, in space. Whereas if you invite a team to press up and you're after losing maybe 3 kickouts in a row, and what's the best option now? Okay, we're just going to drill it long and create an overload, and if we don't win it, we'll foul the ball out there and we'll set up defensively. But it's been brave and actually going for it. And we've probably seen it in the past where, I suppose, Armagh, I think, were similar enough, where the Connor, who was it, that scored a point and short kick out again, and he got a goal straight away.
Turbot?
Off the top of left for
the last day, was
McCarron.
Oh,
he got
Jack McCarron.
And then
we're talking about Monaghan.
Away a short kick out again, and in the space of 30 seconds, a minute, they were 1-1 behind. So there's risk versus reward. The risk is high, and probably the way the game was going, and having to work the ball out of defence, it's hard to know what's the best option, if there's any reward there at all. So I think it shows the calibre of a team that Kerry have become and learned from last year, and kicked on. Like, there obviously was a lot of sore points there, the way they were playing. There was a lot of missed chances early on, but I think those missed chances were probably forcing things that they're really going for the jugular, going for those goals and driving in. There was a lot of turnovers, probably inside that D area, almost in the penalty area, and Cork's penalty area early on, because they knew a running game, run at these guys, and it didn't happen early on, and Cork probably got their tails up, but it just showed they persisted, and the floodgates opened then. I think what was the second half, 2-10 to 2 points.
It was, yeah. The second half was 3-10 to 2 points. Christ almighty. And and even it was a free. Was it a couple of frees a free and an Ian Maguire point from play. By the way, sorry, I actually thought you meant who got a score for Armagh rather than for Monaghan, so that's why I got so confused on that one. Put my hands up on that. A question, do you think Ronan McCarthy, I think that's 4 years in, there's a question in from Out on Bail, do you think Ronan McCarthy has finished at Cork? It's probably tough to, like, if they had to lose and go down fighting or whatever, you'd be thinking, right, go again. But, because they'd beaten Kerry the year before. Now, they did okay in the league, they had to play a relegation playoff, but they'd won 2 out of 3 and just 3 teams ended up on 2 points each. So it was a little bit of a quirk. It wasn't really a reflection on how they played. And they went on and won their relegation playoff. But, like, it's going to be tough to go again, isn't it?
Yeah, this is into his 4th year.
I think he's done 4 years now.
Yeah, look at it. It's tough after probably the last 2 years. Or if Cork people were asked, was the football a success last year or this year? Probably the way the Munster final went last year and the way this year has gone championship-wise, probably not. And it's more so the manner of defeat that always, it's tough when a defeat ends like that. That they take the wind out of Cork. if players are happy and management are happy and things are kind of, it's a happy enough camp to go again next year. And obviously with COVID and that, the last couple of seasons have kind of, you'd almost count them only as one. So his 4-year reign is probably maybe 2.5 tops. Similar to ourselves, that probably never really got a right crack at it. They were flying in the league last year or in Division 3, and then probably didn't have a great league this year, and just stayed up by beating Westmeath, wasn't it? In a cracking game. So look, I think that's one of those things, probably let the dust settle a little bit and see where things are at. Cork, probably a lot of underage coming through there from that winning under 20 team from a couple of years ago. It's probably getting those players in, but it's still the older guys are Brian Hurley, Ian Maguire. There's a few guys there that are still crucial to that squad. So there's probably a transition phase now going forward for the likes of Cork, and whether Ronan McCarthy is the man for that, only time will tell, and he'll know himself whether he's up to it.
So you've obviously seen Dublin at close quarters over a number of years, and watching how they're going through the Leinster Championship this year. They are in the final the next day out, but having beaten Wexford, I think it was 15 points to 7, and then seeing off Meath by 6 points. But it was a very close game going. Like, I think it was down to 3 points going into injury time. I kind of had my stats done here if I have them to hand. Do you see? Let me just see the final score there. Yeah, it was 216 to 113, but it was 213 to 113. Just about going into injury time. And like you said, they held the ball for about 4 minutes. They choked the life out of Meath at the very end. But what are you seeing from Dublin this year? Missing a lot of players. Cluxton isn't there. Kevin McManaman's with the Olympic team. A few other lads have stepped away. No McCaffrey, no Paul Mannion. Eric Lowndes is gone. A few injuries. So what are you thinking with Dublin?
Yeah, I suppose the big thing that going into any game is opposition kickouts, your own kickouts, and then matchups. Probably with Cluxton for years, it was like one of those things: do you press up high? Do you go zonal? Do you go man on man? Always seemed to find a way out. The other way was the way the Dublin forwards pressed the opposition's kickouts, and that was something that there's a lot of joy in. But I think the area that they seem to be struggling with, because of that depth, isn't as the same quality as before, is the matchups, especially defensively. They don't have the same caliber of man markers, and ideally what Dublin were trying to do against Meath was free up the likes of Cooper to get back as a sweeper, or probably wouldn't even say a sweeper. He was more so trying to double up and help those inside defenders. And I think when the likes of Mayo or Kerry come up against Dublin, this is going to be a lot more interesting in getting those matchups right, because the likes of Philly McMahon or Fitzsimons or Davy Byrne, they're probably your 3 really tight man markers. Philly probably hasn't been playing full games, but he's always one of those coming on. But I don't think they probably have that caliber of matchups that they had in the past. And then on the other side, Fenton, Kilkenny and Connor, the 3 players that make Dublin tick. Without doubt, those 3 players, they were the ones that probably made Dublin tick against Meath to get over the line. Scully probably had an off day for himself. He has been one in the past. But I think those 3 guys, any team playing Dublin, if you get your matchups right with them and try and nullify them in some shape or form, I think in the past what was happening was, right, Fenton will get a matchup there, Kilkenny will get a matchup there, and Con. But then these other guys like Rock probably contributed a little bit more from play than Freeze in the past. And then you have other guys, Howard, coming into the play, and then you have half-backs, Merchant, McDade coming and getting on score lines. And I think Scully's a massive player that has probably gone unnoticed, or his fantasy football points have gone up the last number of years, because he's become one of Dublin's key players. When Kilkenny's been tagged, he seems to be the one to almost be the orchestrator, that ball carrier or quarterback. So look, in the past, when you put out a few fires against Dublin, another one starts somewhere else, and you can't just seem to nullify them enough. Whereas this year you're kind of looking. I'm not sure where the next player, the next person is going to come from. I hope I'm right, but I think it's one of those things that they're learning and being tested a little bit more. And you kind of, if Dublin were ever going to be caught in the hop, I think it's probably a semi-final rather than a final. And catching them when by a team that they might have just maybe taken for granted a little bit or brought something different to the table. And that's what you're hoping with Mayo or a Kerry or even a Monaghan or Tyrone, that you kind of have to bring something different to the table against Dublin, because the last number of years you go try and nullify them and sit back. They'll keep possession and they'll drain the life out of you and get you running over and back, up and down, even the way they've done it against Meath. And that's not the first time they've done it. They can mix it by running at you quickly, or they can keep possession if you set up defensively. So it's up to teams to try and counteract that, and obviously get out in front of Dublin and get them chasing you is the ideal way. But when was the last time they've been in a position like that?
Yeah, do you give Kildare much chance going into this game? 4 years ago, they gave a decent performance in Leinster final, and I spoke with Daniel Flynn not so long ago, and he says he still has days where he's annoyed over that goal chance when he was 1-on-1 with Cluxton, and he would have fancied him to bury it. But they beat Westmeath the last day, 2-14 to 18 points. I don't think too many people are giving him a chance, but like, if you look at Dublin in the league against Kerry, massive fade out in the second half, steady the ship against Meath, but massive fade out for a long parts of the second half. And I wonder, like James McCarthy, who's been arguably the best player of the last decade, he's 31 now, a lot of miles and a lot of injuries on the clock there. Some of the key men no longer there. I just don't see as many lads punching through the middle the way Gavin White is for Kerry at the moment, the way McCaffrey should be. So I just, like, do you give any hope to Kildare going into that game?
Look, I'm probably being harsh in the sense talking about Dublin the whole time on Kildare, but I think that's the reality of it, where Dublin are at, especially in Leinster. I suppose the fact that there's been a couple of tight games with Wexford and Meath, it's been a lot tighter than in previous years that were kind of writing off Kildare. I think Kildare will pose problems for Dublin in certain areas, but I just probably the firepower there up front. I still think Dublin probably have those matchups. Flynn will definitely cause problems, but Dublin know that, and there'll be a second man back there the whole time to help out if there's high ball in or that on him. And it's Neil Flynn as well. I think he was phenomenal against Westmeath. I don't know what he kicked. Was it 7 or 8 points between frees and a couple from play? But I think Kildare kicked a lot of free points from frees. I don't think they'll get the same amount of frees against Dublin, because you run at a Dublin team, they're so strong in the tackle, and it's the same with Mayo. Like, how many frees did Galway kick? The top teams don't give away those fouls, those scoreable fouls. If you're fouling a player in a scoreable position, a lot of the time it's to prevent a goal chance. The likes of Mayo and Kerry and Dublin, when they're fouling, there's a reason for it, whereas they back themselves to 1-on-1, that they'll pressurise the man to kick it wide. So I think, look, Flynn, it'd be interesting to see with Feely and Owen Doyle whether they're going to be fit enough for the game. They both went off injured. I'd say Feely would probably be good to go. Looked like more of a bang to the knee, whereas Owen Doyle looked like he was on crutches after the game. So whether he done a muscle injury, 2 weeks is going to be tight going, and especially when you come up against the Dubs, if you're not 100%, they'll definitely expose that. And he's a real leader in that defence for Kildare for the last number of years, and you really want him trying to marshal that defence.
Does it give you a little bit of hope for like the future of Leinster when you see Offaly winning the under-21 game against Dublin last week?
Yes and no. I think it definitely does. I think the biggest thing, like, Offaly have done tremendous work, probably with those different squads from 15s up to 17s up to 20s. There's been a lot of consistent work going in with those guys, and that's across hurling, football, games development officers and S&C coaches. I know Dave Hare was with them and put in a lot of work with those squads. And you see corner forward, what's his name again for Offaly?
The corner forward, Bernard Allen, is it?
No, for the under-20s that got man
Oh,
of the
sorry.
match.
Yeah, I know the guy you're talking about
Anthony
with
was
the
name, but I was
locks.
just looking at his physique, and I was like, my God, this guy, I think he's another year under 20 next year. And built like a brick house, pair of quads on him there, and you're like, that doesn't happen overnight. I think there's a lot of good work that had done that. So in
Cormac
looking at
Egan, was it?
Leinster, pardon?
Cormac Egan, was that his name?
Yes. So I think there's a lot that needs to be looked at too, between changing black cards and rules and subs, and I think overall structure is the answer in order to try and help. I think the gap opens up from under 20 to senior, and there's something there with that Offaly group of lads now. They've got success in under 20, and their ability, Offaly's ability to hold on to those guys to a senior squad and keep them for a number of years is going to be way more higher now after winning. Whereas when you look at other squads that aren't winning at under 17, under 20, what's the point? What's their why for staying on? And that's going to be the issue with probably ourselves and a lot of counties that trying to retain players.
Yeah, and jumping back, I should say, to Mayo. Do you think in what ways will they miss Cillian O'Connor as the year goes on here? Like Ryan O'Donoghue has taken over the frees. He put away the penalty yesterday against Galway. It didn't seem to bother him at all. I interviewed him a few weeks ago. Cool as a breeze sort of character. Like he's a former soccer player with Sligo Rovers, an underage boxer. He seems an unbelievable athlete, very dedicated, the right sort of nutrition and everything. But so maybe he's not fully stepping in for Cillian O'Connor, but certainly is on the place ball. But do you think in what way do you think they'll miss him, or do you think they can overcome that?
I think it could. In looking at it, it's actually helping them that their style and the way they're playing. It's helping them a little bit. I wouldn't say that Cillian O'Connor's hindering, but it's changed the way they attack, rather than looking for Cillian O'Connor on the loop or to play that inside pass that other players have probably stepped up or haven't taken ownership on it. Ryan O'Donoghue is kicking scores. Like I think that they had 9 different scores in the game, and then 1-4 from midfield. Loftus got 2 points. Matthew Moran got 1-2. To get 1-4 from midfield, and then Paddy Durkin got a point, and I'm not sure if anyone else of the defenders got a score. But when you've got to spread the scores like that, rather than relying on your 7-8 points from Cillian O'Connor and probably frees, like there wasn't that many frees again in that game that they kept the ball moving. Looking at some of the way the plays towards the end of that game with Kevin McLaughlin coming off the bench is massive for them, and it's something that when you have that ability to a player of Kevin McLaughlin's ability, that 20-30 minutes in the first half where there's a lot of probably shadow boxing and chasing back and defensive structures and keeping things tight defensively for a wing forward position that he picks up. There's a lot of running for him, I think, in the wrong direction. So having him as a sub coming on and breaking lines when he's fresh, that a player like that might struggle with 20 minutes to go and break those lines if you're after playing a full game. And he offered them something that I think it's huge, him coming in. He cut through in off the left-hand side onto his right foot, and looking back at that play, I think it was Oisin Mullen that got the ball up. I think Lee Keegan was in the same play, and Paddy Durkin was coming too, and you're looking at these guys bearing down on you, and Kevin McLaughlin, the way he cut inside. There's a calibre of players there that probably haven't spread the score as much in the past, and I think that could help Mayo. And probably the elephant in the room that we never mentioned is the contribution that Aidan O'Shea gives them, and what's his best position. I think it's hard to know. I think he's so versatile. I think the way it adapts, if you take it into quarters, 15-20 minute blocks, that he's full forward, he's centre forward, he's dropping back as an extra man, that you allow a player like that to try and read the game, what's best for him and what's best for the team. You know, I think he created 2 or 3 massive turnovers in the game.
He turned over Shane Walsh at one stage, and you're thinking the fastest man on the field. Like.
A massive tackle. And that's huge. I think, again, probably talking about a player like Aidan, that 70 minutes out around the middle, or that really up and down work doesn't suit him. So if it takes a 15 or 20 minute spell, or even a 10-minute spell to drift in full forward and maybe gather the breath a little bit, it's more so to maybe keep the opposition guessing and get a little bit of a rest to go again. That having that caliber of players, or that ability to rotate your forward line or rotate your best players to keep them fresh with 10-15 minutes to go, I think that's crucial when you come up against the top teams.
And just finally then, how do you see Tyrone against Monaghan going in the Ulster final? Like, great job from Tyrone to see off Donegal, but the red card of Michael Murphy, he wasn't right. They started him anyway, missed the penalty, got a red card. I mean, it's a very simple way to try and, you know, put a little pony, or not a ponytail, put a little ribbon on this one and give an easy explanation. But how do you see this Ulster final going?
Just with Monaghan, something that Monaghan have that probably I don't think any other team in the country have it, is that spread of forwards and their keeper, that combination. I think what Beggan gives them as a platform and attack, in comparison, Morgan is similar, but I think Beggan is probably the level above, slightly above him, in how he can come out the field and spray passes and do the right thing, let alone probably his long range free taking and long range kicking. That having an extra man coming out there, do you close Beggan or do you let him come up the field? And that causes a lot of problems for teams. So the calibre of forwards too, with McManus, hopefully he's going to be fit and fully fit, because he occupies 2 defenders when he plays any time, and that's something that that he gives Monaghan, that when he's playing, it'll free up McCarron, it'll free up McCarthy, it'll free up McInnesby running through, you know, because he draws so much attention. And when he comes out looking for that loop or come on the loop, if there's 2 lads trying to close that running game that Monaghan has showed against Armagh, goal chances open up. So I think it's going to be interesting. I think Tyrone, they're going to be cagey enough that, you know, they're not going to get caught out by opening themselves up defensively early on. I think they've probably learned with Kerry, and they've learned probably in their last game that keep things tight at the back here. I know probably in previous years under Mickey Hart that they were extremely tight and maybe too much, and I think they're trying to strike that balance at the moment. But I think coming up against Monaghan, they'll know not to overcommit, and again, looking at the top teams, the calibre of players coming off the bench, Conor McKenna, McShane, these players, what they can offer and change a game coming off the bench, it's why they're up there.
Yeah, they even had Tiernan McCann coming off the bench as well, another player who's been there for years. You mentioned the goalkeeper there, and I couldn't help but think of how Mayo tried to sucker in the Galway keeper yesterday. A couple of times they allowed him to solo out, and he's kind of looking up and he's thinking, well, what am I going to do here? And once or twice he just bombed it. And, you know, players like Niall Morgan, who'll be in the Ulster final, he seems quite comfortable carrying the ball out. He also seems comfortable playing as a bit of a sweeper for when the other team is going to do a long kick out. And Rory Beggan seems comfortable coming out with the ball, albeit he had a rush of blood to the head in an All-Ireland semi-final a few years ago and went for a shot from the 65. But like, this is something that Evan Comerford is probably going to face in the next game or two, assuming Dublin stay going. But like, when you see a goalkeeper, do they now have to be comfortable to solo all the way out to the 45? And you as a teammate, do you have to make sure someone gives him an option if he does get engaged?
Yeah, so like there's probably 2 ways of looking at it. I think if that keeper is capable of playing that longer pass, then you're cagey enough to let him come out the field. Like Beggan or Morgan will go for that pass, that longer one. Whereas the likes of Comerford, he'd be looking for a defender or a midfielder to come and take it off him. And in that position, you're looking at Dublin, Fenton coming back, Howard, these guys, and they will come back and run hard looking for it. Whereas I think the likes of Tyrone and Monaghan go the opposite way, and they'll pull away and let the keeper take space. But from a defensive point of view, they're probably looking from, I think, is a rugby side of things, is a D1 and D2. D1 is defenders that are within one pass of the ball, and your D2s are probably a longer kick pass or 2 passes. So I think in that position, I think what happens is anyone close to the keeper needs to be manning up their man really, really tight. And what happens with the other defenders, your D2s down the field, they gamble and probably take 3 or 4 steps in front of their man. I think you talked about the Galway keeper. That's what Mayo were doing. They were marking their men really, really tight, close to the ball. And then further down the field, which probably you couldn't see on camera, guarantee every Mayo defender was probably 3 or 4 yards in front of their man. And when that Galway keeper looked up for a pass, all he could see was green and white or green and red. So he's just looking for something nearby to play that short pass. And that's where Mayo were really good at pressing 1-on-1 and pressing the keeper, that almost sending him down a channel or setting up a trap for him. And I think Dublin do it really well as well on the outside channels, where they let a defender think, okay, there's space to go down the outside. As soon as he puts the boot down, there's a Dublin defender standing in front of his man. There's nothing on. There's a Dublin defender closing him from the side. And then if he puts the brakes to turn back, Bernard Brogan, I remember seeing clips of him tracking back out. As soon as he puts the brakes on, you have a 2-on-1 and he's closed down. So it's probably the next level of defending that you try and work on these things. I think the top teams they're so well clued in and seeing these situations unfold that if you try and work on situations like this in training, that it's just 2, 3, 4 players on the same page that understand what's happening and reading that situation. All it takes is one player to not be in front of his man or to not do that chase back, that those situations don't arise. And I think that's what happened with Mayo in the second half, that they were all clued into the same hymn sheet, and they were able to squeeze Dublin or Galway so well.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all hoping that Kildare put up a good performance against Dublin, and I mean, it seems unlikely that they'll win this game. But I have to say, the rest of the championship, even if that game ends up a bit of a washout, they're very exciting games left. Like Monaghan Tyrone, I don't think you could confidently call.
Yeah.
Kerry against the winner of that, I don't think you could confidently call. Mayo, look, we'll assume it's Dublin, but Mayo against Dublin. Like for years there, like the previews of Dublin games were, how can we make a case for somehow Dublin getting caught here? They're a bit like Limerick are now. It's like, how do you analyse a hurricane coming at you? It's very hard to pick holes. Whereas now it feels like you can actually, in an exciting way, really try and pick holes and preview these games.
I think so, and I think that's why it's funny looking back, and the Super 8s, I think it more so benefited them that they could roll through their squad and see what they had and adapt and change things to suit. And there was a couple of games there. I remember Shawnee Bulger going up against Tyrone, and it was his first start, and it was a dead rubber game in the last round of the Super 8s, and he got man of the match, and he hadn't played all year. And I don't think.
And they were able to roll back in Diarmuid Connolly as well. Remember that day?
So there's that suited Dublin, whereas now straight into Leinster final, see what happens with Kildare, and then bang, being hit by Mayo. If you hope, or I hope, that it could cause them problems. The other thing is, what Dublin didn't concede a goal last year in the championship. Was it we got conceded 1 or 2 against Meath? I can't remember off.
They conceded 1 against Meath. It was 2-16 to 1-13, I think.
Yeah, I'd love to see. I'd love to see Kildare open them up for a goal and ask more questions. So hopefully Daniel Flynn can be the one to do that, or a few others coming off his shoulder. That I think the thing with Daniel is he is such a threat. But I suppose probably reading, he could free space up by what we're saying about Conor McManus, drawing attention to him by pulling out wide and letting someone else drift in. So I think, look, it's going to be interesting. I just love to see Kildare giving them socks and open them up for a goal, a couple of goal chances, to ask those questions and put that little bit of doubt into their heads going into Mayo. And look, who knows?
And a very, very final thing. I was doing a top 5 footballers left in the championship the other day with Declan Bogue, and I was saying my top 5 was Brian Fenton, Conor O'Callaghan, David Clifford, Paddy Durkin, Kieran Kilkenny. Have I left anyone out that's still left in the championship, or would you have slightly different thoughts on who'd be the best or your top 5?
No, that's, to be honest, there's not too many more. I'm looking at Tyrone. I'm just hoping Conor McKenna, someone like that, could just light things up.
He could become that. Like he's like you know that he could become that, McKenna. Like the way he turned over a ball that was going in for Paddy McBrearty, burst up the field. I think he assisted McCurry for a finish. I mean, you look at it and you're like, that's a different level of athlete.
Like, has he played in Croke Park yet?
Oh, that's a question now. I don't think they did. No, they lost last year to Donegal.
And that he was going to, like, by God, geez, someone like him, I'd be hoping that he really opens up. But you look at Monaghan, like Conor McManus, in my eyes, has, look at, you talk about Dublin, you talk about Kerry, but consistently, you're talking 5-10 years, Conor McManus has been the top 2-3 footballers in the country. I know he probably hasn't won Player of the Year or that, but like what he has done and the scores he's kicked, like single-handedly, he's been dominating for Monaghan for years. And he's probably at the top end of the scale now with how many years he has left. But I think he's a close 5th or 6th. And then you look elsewhere. I think Paddy Clifford, all the attention drawn to David, I think his work rate and now that he's getting on the scoreboard as well, he's another one that's going to offer something. But yeah, it's funny, I'll be racking my brains today now, picking out a few other ones, a few of the dark horses that can come from nowhere to offer something. But I think you've hit the nail on the head with most of those guys.
But are we getting a small bit carried away with Paddy Clifford? I mean, he's come through a Munster championship where, you know, it was easy enough fare for him against Tipperary and Cork. I don't think he had a great 70 minutes. He did all right against Dublin in the league, but is it a little bit too soon to be lauding him?
Possibly. A few flair moments. I think that outside of the boot pass in one of those earlier games where it went long. But I think what happens with those type of players is that he's got a tremendous work rate and he's versatile. And you know, I think he's wearing a corner forward number, but he roams a lot. But he's also the type of player that there's 2 or 3 matchups that are really tight ahead of him. Who's going to take up David Clifford? Who's going to take up Seanie O'Shea? Who's going to take up? And I think he's 3rd or 4th choice. And that's what we probably talked a little bit about with Dublin, with matchups, that they're the players that actually will win or lose you a game. I think your top 3 or 4 players, people say that they'll balance each other out or match each other up. It's the next caliber of players that probably could have a field day or win a man of the match and chip in with 1, 2 or 3. And I think that could be the likes of Paddy coming on in the All-Ireland semi-final and final, that he could be that type of player that he's going to be the one that turns the screw and lights things up for Kerry.
Yeah, God, I'm mad to see the next round of games now, and especially when we get down to the All-Ireland semi-finals. You've been very good with your time, Mickey. Really appreciate you joining me today.
Thanks a million, Shane. Cheers.